There is a whole lot of love in today's passage from First John. A whole lot of love. It's got me thinking about just what love is. Where does it come from? What does it look like in our lives? What does it look like in the life of our nation? Surely it's not just a feeling. I recall a study that looked at what happens in the brain when someone is passionately in love. You know that butterfly in the stomach stage when just thinking about someone gets your heart racing. For some, that feeling is their definition of love. Well, they've done studies on people in that stage of a relationship in which they show that serotonin levels in your brain are similar to those of someone who has been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. This particular study, it had one line that said, "Love and mental illness may be difficult to tell apart." And later, the author says, if the chemically altered state induced by romantic love is akin to a mental illness or a drug-induced euphoria, exposing yourself for too long could result in psychological damage. They go on to say, in fact, studies around the world confirm that passion usually ends, or at the very least, it wanes. If it didn't, it would kill us. But for some of us, that is our baseline definition or experience of love. And while those feelings are nice, surely that's not what the writer of 1 John is talking about. Nor is the author connecting love with liking. We live in a world where we click thumbs up to indicate our preferences for just about anything. We like a picture of a relative or a neighbor on Facebook as a way of saying, I see you, I'm connected to you, I like you. But liking is not the same thing as loving. The truth is that same family member or committee member might drive us up the wall every time they come over for Sunday dinner or sit down for a session meeting. We don't have to like them, but we love them. There are ties that bind deeper and in a more profound way. I don't have to like you to love you. Beloved, since God loved us so much, we also ought to love one another. But if love isn't a feeling, a sense of euphoria, if it isn't liking, what is it? I want to suggest that it is that which cannot, which will not let us go. It is that which is annoyingly persistent. 27 times in today's passage, the author writes the word love. It's a terrible amount of love. In his short story, Pray Without Ceasing, the Southern writer Wendell Berry tells the story of two best friends, Ben and Thad. They're Kentucky farmers, and Thad gets into some financial trouble because his son makes a bad investment. So he humbles himself and he comes to his friend Ben to ask to borrow some money. Ben doesn't say no, but he doesn't say yes right away, and in a fit of drunken and irrational rage, Thad kills his best friend. And then he proceeds to turn himself into the county sheriff. Thad's daughter comes to visit him his first night in jail. Wendell Berry writes, the sheriff opened the cell door and stood aside to let her in. I'll come back after a while, he said. The door closed and was locked behind her, and she stood still until Thad felt her presence and looked up. When he recognized her, he covered his face with both hands. He put his hands over his face like a man ashamed, but he was like a man, too, who had seen what he couldn't bear. Berry continues, maybe Thad saw his guilt full and clear then, but what he saw that he couldn't bear was something else. People sometimes talk of God's love as if it's a pleasant thing, but it's terrible in a way. Think of all it includes. It included Thad Coulter, drunk and mean and foolish before he killed his best friend Ben, and it included him afterwards. and it includes you and me. We love because he first loved us. Our text tells us that God is love. Love is not God, but twice we're told that God is love. The writer could have said God was power, God was prestige. We could have been told that God is goodness or friendship. Instead, we're told that God is love. And the only way we know God is by loving one another. The most faithful thing Christian churches could do is to put signs out front that say, "Come in and we will love you. We might not like you, but we will love you. Test us. We don't have a choice in this." Vincent van Gogh once said, "I'm always inclined to believe that the best way of knowing God is to love a great deal." I have no idea if he said that after reading this passage from 1 John, but they're saying the same thing. How we treat one another, how we love one another says everything about how we love God. If this doesn't bring us to our knees, I'm not sure what will. For we cannot love God without loving the people who are right in front of us. We love because he first loved us. The people in front of us, those at home, at work, those at the grocery store, those on the news, those who live across town, they don't earn our love any more than we earn God's love. This week I heard the story of a couple of former prisoners who were imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit. When they were finally exonerated, they understandably left prison bitter and angry. They drank too much. They had learned to hate. They were free, yet still imprisoned. Until one day they decided there had to be a better way. So they started meditating, and eventually they learned to forgive, and then they realized they might have something to offer to others who needed to learn how to love again. So they opened their home to other people who'd been wrongly imprisoned. Their program was simple. They loved the people who lived with them. They said of their mission, "We really just love on them and make them dinner." And we do that over and over and over again until they offer to help with the dishes. When that happens, we know they're just about ready to go home. Beloved, since God loved us so much, we ought to love one another. You see, the problem in the world, maybe the problem in our own community, is that while people were created to be loved and things were created to be used, we've gotten it backwards. Things are being loved and people are being used. Beloved, let us love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. The priest Richard Capon wrote, "No matter how much we give lip service to the notion of free grace and dying love, we do not like it. It's just too indiscriminate. It lets rotten sons and crooked tax farmers and common tarts in the kingdom, and it thumbs its nose at really good people." He says it does that gallingly for no more reason than the gospel's shabby exaltation of dumb trust over worthy works. Such nonsense, he says, we mutter in our hearts, such heartless, immoral folly. We'll teach God, we say. We will continue to sing Amazing Grace in church, but we will jolly well be judicious when it comes to explaining to the riffraff what it actually means. We will assure them, of course, that God loves them and forgives them, but we will make it clear that we expect them to clean up their act before we clasp them seriously in our bosom. I think he might be onto something. But we love because God first loved us. One of my favorite stories tells of a woman who finally decided to ask her boss for a raise in salary. All day she felt nervous and apprehensive. Late in the afternoon, she summoned the courage to approach her employer. And to her delight, the boss agreed to a raise. And the woman arrived home that evening to a beautiful table set with their very best dishes. Candles were softly glowing, and her husband had come home early and prepared a festive meal. She wondered if someone from the office had tipped him off, or did he just somehow know that she would not get turned down. She found him in the kitchen and told him the good news, and they embraced and kissed. And they sat down to the wonderful meal. And next to her plate, the woman found a beautifully lettered note. It said, "Congratulations, darling. I knew you'd get the raise. These things will tell you how much I love you." The supper was perfect. Afterward, her husband went into the kitchen to clean up, and as he left the room, she noticed a second card had fallen from his pocket. Picking it off the floor, she read, "Don't worry about not getting the raise. You deserve it anyway. These things will tell you how much I love you." Someone has said that the measure of love is when you love without measure. What that man tried to convey to his spouse was total acceptance and love. Whether she succeeded or failed, whether she won or lost, he loved her regardless. Love without measure. Sometimes love might celebrate victories. Other times it was there to soothe and comfort. It's our call. Upon receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, Mother Teresa said, "What can you do to promote world peace?" She said, "Go home and love one another." Church, go home, go into your neighborhood, go and love one another because God first loved you. Amen.